Okay, let's get started. Again, welcome everybody in this webinar. Um, I see a lot of faces, a lot of people who have joined our webinars before, but also some people are new, and I see a lot of people in this call. So that's very nice. And apparently, forecasting is indeed a subject that is of interest to many of us. And well, that's actually part of this. And why we have this webinar about forecasting. There's a lot to say. You can talk about, you can talk about techniques. You can talk about how to measure things. But yeah, today's the way we approach the subject today is by asking ourselves the question: why is it so difficult? But let me start by introducing myself. My name is Ger Koole. As I said, I know many of you, but some of you I don't know. So perhaps you don't know me. So let me shortly introduce myself. I'm one of the founders of CCmath already quite some time ago, almost 20 years. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this summer. Of course, we're doing workforce management. Me, myself, I'm next to being a founder and chief scientist of CCmath, I'm also a full professor at the university here in Amsterdam. So I'm combining both the academic, my academic work with the more practice-oriented work for CCmath. And to me, a very inspiring combination to see both theory and in scientific research, also in broader fields outside of call center workforce management and the more applied side for CCmath. Again, today's subject is why contact center forecasting is so tough. But that's a statement, and perhaps you disagree with that. Perhaps, perhaps there are reasons why you joined. You want to learn something about forecasting because you feel yourself it's a difficult activity, and I will try to convince you of that. But let me first ask you the question. So let me go to the polls here in Google Meet, and let me launch the poll. So I'm interested to hear from you, and on your screen, if everything goes well, you see a poll. You can vote. And of course, there are limited options. Perhaps you have another option in mind, perhaps, but then please choose the one which is, closest to how you feel about it. And I see already quite some people voting. In a few seconds, I will show you the results. Okay, let me, not everybody has voted, but let me, I see already an interesting question coming in. So we will address most of the questions toward the end of the webinar. And again, also, if you, we could always, if you want to dive deeper into something, and book a separate conversation. Okay, so I think you see now the answers. So perhaps there's a bias here. We're talking, forecasting is about is a statistical activity. So then we're talking about biases. Of course, if you think that forecasting is a piece of cake, perhaps you have something else to do than listen to this webinar. But I see most of you saying, would love to have more control of my volume. And of course, I recognize that, and we see that with many of the customers we talk to. And I'm also glad to see that some of you, I see somebody who can't see the end. Can you see the answers? Perhaps I will say so. If you can't,
no answers are visible.
Oh, I show everyone the results. I'm sorry. Okay, let me tell you the answers. because I cannot see how I could do it. And this is weird. I switched on the button, show everyone the result. Well, that might be a glitch in Google. So I'm very sorry for this. Let me tell you what I see. For the 5 out of you that had the first, some of you see it. Okay, that's I switched it on and off. Perhaps that helped. But meeting tools, polls to see results. Okay. I see somebody saying go to meeting tools, polls, and then you see results. These are the square with the points, meeting tools. You click on that. And then, okay, sorry, I should have told you this. Perhaps that explains why around half of you answered the poll. Sorry about that. So most of you said, I would love to have more control of my volume. Some of you, and I'm glad to see that as well, have it under control. And only one of you, you don't have to disclose yourself, but says piece of cake, thanks to modern tooling. And that's also, what are we going to address? What are the pros and cons of modern tooling? Does it indeed, solve everything, as sometimes people, as some people will say? Okay. And basically, if you think about it, that's a weird question. Yeah, that's it. Well, it's the fact that we ask this question is somewhat weird, because forecasting is not something new. It's something we have been doing for decades, if not centuries. Yes, and it is needed everywhere, not just in contact center. It's needed in logistics, in production, in healthcare, epidemiology. I mean, everybody uses forecasting. It's studied worldwide in almost any university where they teach statistics and also study. Then forecasting is a very common subject. So why is this the case? Yeah, and also within workforce management, I think that as staffing calculation using the Erlang formula, people know, hey, we should use the Erlang formula. And there are different versions of that. But I think in other steps of workforce management, it's more clear what we should use. So why is it that we struggle? I will try to address that question and also give you an idea without giving the ultimate solution, but also give you an idea on which approaches there are available to perhaps improve your forecast. Let me first give a list of reasons, and then I'll dive into all of them in more detail. So if you don't fully get what I'm saying here, I will explain things in the next slide. First, I will explain to you why contact center forecasting is different from other types of forecasting, the ones I just mentioned. That is partly related to the fact that contact center volumes have many drivers. In certain situations, new modern AI techniques are the solution, but there are also situations where that's not the case, and I will explain you or give my opinion on why that is the case. Dive a bit deeper into intra-year data, and then also the fact that is often overlooked by data scientists, that things are very much domain specific, here being the domain being the call centers, call center domain. Okay, let's dive into these reasons one by one. The first thing is that call center forecasting is about what we call high frequency data. For example, there are competitions about forecasting. The best known are the so-called M competitions. But very often they are about other types of data. So they don't tell you what is best for call center forecasting. So why is call center forecasting different than other types of data? What is high frequency data? Well, this is an example you see here of high frequency data. This is the red line could be very well be a forecast, but the different blue lines are call center volumes. And these are call center volumes at the quarter level, at quarters of a day. And that is what we call high frequency data, when things are at the quarter level or even at the minute level or at the call by call level. Yes, and that is different from other types of forecasting because, and definitely if you look at, let's say, historical forecasting tasks, they are very often at the day level at most, sometimes even at the weekly level, at the monthly level. If you look at traditional forecasting examples, for example, that are often used in textbooks, sometimes at the month level, or even at the year level. Yes, and if you're in retail, yes, what is if you're doing inventory management, then you get deliveries at most once a day, perhaps once per week. So there's no need to have your forecast at the 15-minute level. Yes, if you look at epidemiology, and of course we were confronted a few years ago during the COVID pandemic. We were all confronted with statistics and how epidemiologists did their forecasting, and that's also typical at the week level. Yes, and they overlook, for example, the fact that within a week, yes, the Monday might be very different from the Saturday or the Sunday, which is definitely the case in call centers. So that means that in call centers, there are all these different types of seasonality. Intraday, as you see here, an intraday pattern, intra-week, intra-year, that you won't see in other types of forecasting. Yeah? This means that these methods, and I don't expect you, perhaps you have a statistical background, so then the names I'm mentioning here ring a bell to you. Perhaps not, but that's not a problem. But typical mathematical techniques that are developed in the second half of the previous century or even before, they do not include all the details that are there that you need to make good call center forecasts. That means actually, and that's, for example, a difference with staffing using Erlang. There are hardly any off-the-shelf methods. It's not that there's some standard tooling that you can very easily use. In many cases, you have to do it yourself. And that is, everybody is doing something different, something slightly different, because there's no generally accepted method to do call center forecasting. And one of the reasons is that these standard methods are not, you cannot one-to-one use them for call centers. So that is, I would say, the first reason. And linked to that, to dive a bit more into the details, what makes it different? Well, as I said, call center volume has these many drivers, all these forms of seasonality. I mentioned that to you. Here you see, of course, a weekly pattern with low volume during the weekends. And what you see here is another form of intraday seasonality, where you clearly see a morning and an afternoon peak. And well, in green and red, two different forecasts, with the green one being the better one. But that's not only what's driving call center volume. Of course, there's noise. That's always the case. You cannot fully predict the volume. But there's also trends. Yes, and trend is more the long term, the spanning over multiple years. The intra-year seasonality repeats itself every year in a similar shape, but the long-term trends, it's over the long term, over the months, the years. Perhaps a call center gets more customers, or perhaps AI is taking over, or the product gets better, there's less customer support needed. That all has impact on trends. But what is very specific to call center volume, and what it also makes different from other types of forecasting, why you cannot directly use a standard method, is that we have events happening. And these events, and that can be marketing events, that can be holidays, that can be bill runs, and that they have, in many call centers, quite a big impact. And you can go even further. level changes. Sometimes the IVR changes, and then, I mean, the volumes look very differently, but you still want to use the historical data. Or things like readouts, which are very specific to call centers. So a high volume at a certain point in time might be the consequence of a bad service level with many people redialing. Yes, and you're not, so you have to model that explicitly, and otherwise you might overestimate your volume, and because you're including the readouts. So here a small graph of how how a call center looks like, with fresh and offered volumes, etc. That's already a subject apart on which we could have a separate webinar. And again, many of the subjects that I touch upon, we already have webinars and other information and blogs. So if you're interested, please have a look at our website. Yes. Then you might say, okay, what methods are there out there that give me the flexibility to deal with all these different aspects? So if ARIMA and Hold Winters, and I'll dive a bit more into details about that. So what are then methods where you can include all these different aspects? Yes. And so let's talk a bit about methods. So one method is decomposition. Yes. And so in decomposition, you say, okay, we have all these drivers of our volume. Yes. So let's have a look at what is their impact one by one. And then we kind of build our model, we compose our model out of that. And that is what most people are doing when they are working in Excel. Let's say the traditional call center forecasting way. One of the problems with that is that you have to know the earlier steps to do the later step. Yes. Perhaps you're looking at the intra-week volume, and then you discover, hey, this Thursday here, that is really different. That must be an event. But knowing that's an event, that would have changed the intra-week volume. Yeah? So it's like, well, how do you call that? Chicken and an egg, or a snake biting its tail. It's hard to know where to start. Yes, doesn't mean that it doesn't work at all, but but it makes it less precise. Now the theoretical solution is then you go back to this earlier step, you do it again, and you go back again. So we call that multipass methods. But that is a lot of work, hard to execute in Excel. So most people don't do that. But this is one way. Of course, you have to compose everything yourself, a lot of handwork, but you really understand what you're doing if you build the spreadsheet yourself, at least. Another method, also a more traditional method from some time ago, is linear regression. As linear regression is a very general prediction method, and not only for time series, and not only for time data like the ones I mentioned before, like Hold Winters. A general method, but you can also very well use it for call centers. Now, and when talking about flexibility, linear regression, it's a bit like a tight framework you're in. Yes? The linearity, I mean, going into details of that, again, that's a subject by itself. It doesn't always give linear forecast. You can do more general thing, but it's still a framework that constrains in a certain way the freedom you have, and with that the flexibility, and that makes it less precise. And I'll show you some graphs of that, an example on the next slide. I'll go a bit into more detail of that. But I do think that in general that linear regression is an option that is not that often used, but can be a bit. I think that it should receive a bit more interest. But what really receives interest nowadays are, of course, machine learning methods. So modern AI methods. So prediction methods based on, yeah, they require lots of data, but are very powerful methods. And here again, a couple of abbreviations. Again, if you're not familiar with that, it doesn't matter. But a very easy to deploy machine learning method, AI method, is called XGBoost, based on decision trees. LSTM is a type of neural network that is often used for time data, for time series. So they are the obvious candidates if you're interested in using AI methods. Um, so as I said, AI methods, you could also call them, to compare to linear regression, you could call them nonlinear regression methods. And my previous webinar that I gave a few months back was about AI. There I dived a bit deeper into these differences, so I won't do that here today. But what's important here is that they can basically learn any pattern. Yes, they are way more flexible than, say, linear regression. So in that sense, they are also way more precise. Um, but actually, and that is sometimes overlooked by people who really are into these methods. So they also have their disadvantages because this flexibility comes at a cost. And let me dive a bit deeper into this. And then these are somewhat less familiar things about these type of methods. So sorry about the graph, but I hope it's clear what it's about. So what you see here are a couple of data points. Let's say on the horizontal axis is time, and on the vertical axis, that's the volume. Yes, and you're interested in this day here towards the end, and you want to know a forecast. Now, if you would do a linear regression, then you would get something like this. Yes. Now, of course, you see this is not very precise because it doesn't really hit these blue dots. Yes, but yeah, it is not that bad. If you look at these blue points and ignoring seasonality and all kinds of other things. Let's trying to focus on the core thing. Um, it doesn't look that bad. So what you see is that linear regression, and again, this is a simple example, but it's of course to show you a bigger phenomena. Um, it lacks this precision and flexibility, but it's pretty robust in the sense that you still get a reasonable forecast that is not completely off. And as I just said, linear regression, you can do a bit more. For example, you can put a certain types of curves in here. You can do that as well. There's much more possible in linear regression. But the important thing is you have to put it in yourself. And the interesting thing about these AI methods, such as XGBoost, they discover the pattern themselves. And in principle, they can discover any pattern. So as you can see here, this is way more precise on these points. Yes, but nobody guarantees that you either get this prediction, which is way lower than this prediction. Yeah, and it is hard to say. Definitely, when these points lay a bit further away, what your AI methods will do. Yes, so this is all about what they call generalizability. How does it perform on new points? Yes, on data points that it isn't trained on, that it hasn't seen before, and that even more so the case if these points lay a bit further away. Yeah, there's no guarantee there that it finds something like linear. There are, well, of course, there are tricks for everything, but this makes it so. In general, you will find that these AI methods are very precise, but then sometimes they are off, yeah, in certain situations. So that is what I mean also by robustness. I mean, 1 or 2% better is perhaps not a big thing, but that it's sometimes really off, I mean, that might be something that is problematic. So that makes them, well, you really have to be careful with that. So that's a problem with this AI method. Something else that all methods have, and I'm zooming in on intra-year data, because of course all of you, if you're forecasting in a call center, you have lots of data. You have multiple years of data, hopefully at a detailed 15-minute level, perhaps for tens or even hundreds of lines. So you have lots of data. But if you have perhaps over 2 years, so that is an enormous lot of data, but that still gives relatively little information what your pattern is intra-year. And let me zoom in a bit on it. So suppose that these are 2 years of intra-year pattern. Yeah, so you normalize. So the red and the blue line are percentages, week of the year. So the first dot here is the percentage. So in January, volume is the highest. Perhaps there is trend, so perhaps the volume in 1 year is way higher than the other. But you made it, you normalized it. So it's a profile. And as you can see, there are some fluctuations in this profile. And there are also some differences. Here, the red profile is quite a bit higher, and here blue and red are quite apart. Okay. Now you want to know the intra-year profile of the next year. How will that look like? Yeah. So what people usually do is they take the average. Yes. And if you take the average, you get something like this. Sorry for the bit blurry picture. But of course, it follows partially. Yeah, this where this red year is a bit higher, and here it's somewhere in the middle. Is this really what's happening? Or is it more like this? Do you expect more a smooth pattern? Yeah. Now, again, these AI methods, they are trained and they need lots and lots of data to get a very, to follow very nicely the pattern. However, yeah, we don't have that much data if you look at the intra-year level. So then you might get something which we call overfitting. Yes, because this bump here, if you project that on next year, won't perhaps happen. Perhaps here there was something happening. Perhaps you filter it out because of an event, but often there are bumps left for which you have no explanation. Yeah? So this is dangerous. Yeah, so it might be, and actually, in many situations, we can show that if you make something smooth, that is better. Yeah? But making something smooth like this requires a lot of knowledge about call center data. Yeah? That is not automatically part of these methods, such as the AI methods I just mentioned. So actually, building this in your methods requires quite some domain knowledge and requires quite some understanding, and also the possibility to manipulate your methods. And talking about domain knowledge, there are more aspects where domain knowledge plays a big role. And for example, events, and here this is an example of events. Here's a Monday with more volume than usual, and then here this green graph shows you in this particular situation the impact of the event. And here another event, it might be a mailing, a marketing event. Yes, so events play a role. Intraday patterns, I showed you a few slides back. There were intraday pattern, there were two different graphs. The smoother graph gives the better forecast. Yes, and also this requires methods that do not come in standard method. Well, I mentioned already level changes. Yeah, so this is some call center specific logic that makes it hard to put that in. I see an interesting remark there, but we'll come to the questions later on. So you need a lot of call center specific logic. So, and data scientists, experienced data science say that all the time. And what is even more important than knowing your techniques, and I mentioned techniques, is it long-term memory networks, these LSTMs and XGBoost. Even more important than knowing your techniques as a data scientist is understanding and knowing where you apply it and how you should apply it. But these specific things that are very specific to call centers are hard to build into a general prediction algorithm such as XGBoost. Yes, it can be done if you, for example, do it up front. If you filter out the events first and then you put the rest into the next step that does the forecasting without the events. Yeah, so you do first some pre-processing, take out the events, and do other things, and then at the end you add them again. Yeah, but then you're basically doing a decomposition approach. Okay, so what I've done so far, I mentioned a couple of aspects that, in my opinion, are the most important things, and it's not just my opinion. It's of course based on experience with many call centers that we work with, that we've seen out there, that struggle with their forecasting activities. So, what to do? Again, the title of this webinar is why for contact center forecasting is so tough. So I hope I've addressed that. So there are no off-the-shelf methods, and also there are different reasons why these different off-the-shelf methods are hard to use or are not that precise. Yes. So what to do? Yeah. Again, I don't have a solution. If I would have like a ready-made solution, then everybody would have used it. Other people would have found it as well, and people would have used it. So there's no solution for everything here. What we saw so far is that every type of algorithm has its advantages and its disadvantages. And so here are a couple of things, this lack of the domain-specific things, this lack of the generalizability. I haven't talked about explainability, but you would definitely, if it's part of a decomposition, would like to understand what an algorithm does. Yes, and by some algorithms, then you get certain parameters that tell you right away, hey, what does this mean? And with others, it doesn't. Yes, and this flexibility that I mentioned, and the flexibility to follow any pattern. Okay, and then I've talked about these different methods. I've talked about these advanced mathematical methods like Sari, Marx, and Holt Winters. Talked about machine learning, AI method, especially XGBoost and LSTMs. Talked about decomposition, often done in Excel, where you do things step by step and you isolate one seasonality by the other. And I've talked about linear regression, where you can put everything in one model with a parameter for the weeks and parameter for the day of the week, etc., etc. So the domain specifics, they are very hard to build in these advanced mathematical methods. And well, to a certain extent, also in linear regression and in the machine learning method. There are certain tricks, but they are still very hard. This generalizability, that's especially a problem with these very flexible machine learning methods. Yes, that you do not know how they behave a bit outside of the areas of the values you normally see. Yeah. This explainability, these mathematical methods and these machine learning methods are hard. There are especially that's also a problem if you want to add something. Yes, so okay, if you do not know exactly what it does, how can you tell what it does and doesn't? Yes, how can you that makes it very hard to tweak. And as I said, these machine learning methods are super flexible. That's why on quite a number of data sets, they actually give very good results. But the other methods have that problem. Of course, the decomposition, you can you can build your own methods in it, but especially these more mathematical methods, they are not that flexible, but that make them more generalizable. So that's also a trade-off. Yeah, and perhaps that's the bottom line of my story. Again, going back to where I started, there's no one size fits all. It's all about trade-offs. Yes, it's what is characteristic, what is important in your data. Do you have a lot of seasonality? Do you have a huge trend? Are events playing a big role? Do you have a lot of readouts? So it depends a bit on what is important in your data, which method is most suitable for you. Yeah. So again, no one size fits all, but I hope I gave you a bit of insight in the different options and the pros and cons of these different options. Of course, we at CCmath, we have our forecasting tooling, and so we have to deal with all types of call center data. So what we have done is we've built our own algorithm in which we have tried to address all these different aspects that play a role in call centers, these smooth patterns, etc. Yes, and we've built that into our own special purpose. Well, I should say contact center forecasting algorithm. Of course, you could use it if you're interested in detailed retail data, this type of thing. But it's really tailor-made for call centers with events in it, etc. Okay, this is the most important thing, what I wanted to tell. I hope you found this informative. Again, in this webinar, it was impossible to give you the solution to everything, so I hope I didn't disappoint you. But I hope I gave you some insights and some ideas on how to move forward. And coming back to the poll in the beginning, as you said, many of you, are still a bit struggling with it. So I hope I gave you some ideas. If you need help with this, don't hesitate to contact us. We're always happy. Of course, we have our forecasting tooling that does much more than making good forecasts, that help you with your data management, your event management, input and importing, outputting data. So if you're interested, please book a demo. We're happy to talk about your challenges and how we could help you. Also, if you think, hey, this is interesting information, I would love to have more information, please join us for a training. We have online trainings, we have face-to-face trainings. So have a look at our website or schedule a call with us, and we're happy to tell you what the possibilities are. We do have a training more on advanced WFM. There's also one day on forecasting, but on all aspects of workforce management, a full week in Amsterdam, with also always every year some people from the Netherlands, but also lots of international participants. Also very interesting to talk to other people. So we still have a number of places. So please let us know. Okay. I hope you find this interesting. It's time for questions. I saw already lots of questions coming by. I saw that some of my colleagues were already giving some answers, but let's have a look at what's out there, and if I can try to answer some questions. I see here in Bas is texting me some things. How can I find if it's okay? What if volume is not only a time series? Yeah, linear regression. I don't know if that's the question. By using what they call one-hot encoding, you can tag the day of the week, or you can tag events of the week of the year. So linear regression actually a very general method. Problem with the linear regression is how to model trends. And there is some lack of flexibility there, and also with the smooth intra-year patterns. Yes, but in principle, you can do a lot with it. It's a general prediction technique. Again, it lacks the flexibility of these AI techniques, which do the same, which kind of discover the features themselves, but like day of the week, etc. But it is, it is explainable. You get the parameters, so you understand exactly. Okay, this is the percentage on Monday, and this is the volume on week 40, etc. Even though that's in the, it's still right. Yeah, yeah, I agree with what Marcel says that it's still somewhat risky. Yeah, I think, I mean, in every, I mean, also if you're using decomposition in Excel, it's easy to make mistakes. So there should always be a human check. Does it make sense? So automated forecasting should be really confident about your tooling. Yes. Forecast down for a specific that has. Yeah, yeah. I agree with Coach that it also depends on the audience, and it also depends, and the audience, for example, depends on whether it's short term or long term. And the long term, um, the trend plays an important role. In the shorter term, it's more about intra-week seasonalities, events, intra-year. If you're in retail towards the end of the year, of course, huge volumes that drop down quickly after in the beginning of the new year. Yeah, a bit of insights in Leia. Yeah, what we do is we have certain regression type methods, but we do make, like I showed on one of the slides, these smooth intra-year patterns. So we really so if you have more years of data, then it more follows the pattern. Because more data gives you more certainty about the pattern, but we can make it smoother. So it's basically playing with these types of smoothness, and of course also things like events that you really get good, robust forecasting. I don't know. No, it's not an abbreviation actually. It's um, um, there's a story behind it. We wanted to move away from the people around us, and but I can tell you in a private conversation if you're interested. But it's no, yeah. Gaetano knows the answer. Yeah. No, yeah. I see some more questions. Mike Miguel, you raised. Perhaps you want to speak up or put it in the chat, whatever you. I'm going to have a look at the chat, but there are many questions. Yeah, and a couple of people raised hands. You can either unmute yourself and ask your question, or put it in the chat. Let me see. How do we get through you? Yeah, I mean, I'm not into data privacy. That's really what some other people at CCmath are specialized in. But typically, um, of course, forecasting is usually done there. There's no personal data in when you do the forecasting that goes into the algorithm. That is one thing. Um, There are certain cases, but very special cases where you should be careful with that, and where it gives some information where you can deduct it. But I haven't seen them in contact center forecasting. I haven't seen these issues playing a role. Yeah, I see a lot of questions, but and a lot of discussion. So very interesting. Yeah, in healthcare services. Yeah, uh, when it's possible, we always try to get anonymous data. Yeah, so then there's less of a privacy issue. Yeah, then when you don't get the data, that is, and then there's no risk at all. But we also, in our case at least, we have customers that normally we have tooling in the cloud, but that require that it's in a certain country or on premise, and that might be solutions for that. Yeah. Of course, there's a whole direction in AI about data privacy, yeah, and how you can how you can anonymize data or change data a bit such that you cannot trace it back to the original poor person. But I see somebody asking, I've heard of Facebook Profit. How does that work? Um, Actually, Facebook Profit. So Facebook Profit is also a forecasting algorithm that some people tried and use in call center context. That is also using a certain regression technique. There are some other concepts behind it than our own forecasting algorithm. But let's say it's also linear regression plus. So it is certain modern techniques to model the seasonality and then do a regression. So linear regression is, of course, a standard technique. And in Facebook Profit, people at Meta, they try to do certain things that are more specific to call center forecasting. Yeah, so it has a bit similar ideas as our Leia algorithm. Yeah, I hear different things from it. Sometimes a bit mixed output, but that might also be the case. These tooling, you also have to know how to use it, and the ideas behind it not always super easy. So I'm always interested in learning about your experience. If the AI is within, then there are any engine companies offering the AI service. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that plays a role in Gen AI, where you use outside. And most of the time, these AI models are trained on your own data and stay within your own environment. It's with Gen AI, and you have these frozen LLMs. They are trained outside, but well, and so you have to communicate the data to this tooling. That's where that at least plays a role. But I don't know if that's exactly what your question is. But these are important things, definitely, when you're using Gen AI to think about it. Okay. I think we're approaching the end of this webinar. I'm very glad to see that so many people present. So thank you all very much for joining. Again, we have lots of more information about forecasting and other WFM subjects on our website. So please go there. And if you want us to help you with any of your challenges, or if you're interested in one of our trainings to know more about that, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll be more than happy to start a conversation and know more and see how we can help you. Yeah, the dangers of AI. Thanks, Koos, for your contribution. Okay, thanks again for attending, and hope to see you in our previous webinars or at some other occasion. Thanks again for attending. Bye bye.